Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the West Ham Network and welcome to the big debate. Thanks for joining us. As it says on that little thing at the bottom, get your questions in, put a queue at the beginning. It makes the question much easier to find. So we've got behind the scenes, we've got someone else pressing the buttons. So let's get the button monkey in, shall we?
All right.
There he is. There he is in all his glory. How are you doing, Russ?
Yeah, not bad. Just doing what I usually do at match days anyway, pressing buttons and just making sure everyone can be heard. So, yeah, no difference. It's Busman's holiday for me.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, let's get the other guests in then, shall we?
Yeah, let's get them in. Let's get we'll keep with Brand.
Good evening. Good evening.
How you doing, Alex? You fine?
I'm good, thank you very much. Looking forward to Premier League football returning this weekend.
Look, I knew I'd get this. I knew I'd get this. All these jibes. Listen, this is top quality clobber. I'll have you know, Mr. Singleton. No need for that. Also sitting in the green room, we have Sloth of Babbly Irons. How are you, sir?
I'm very good, thank you very much. How are you all doing?
Sweet as a nut.
I feel underdressed. I feel underdressed.
No, it's fine. Don't worry. You don't know what I'm wearing on the bottom half. I could be wearing Hawaiian shorts for all you know.
Newsreaders wearing pants under the bottom, yeah, under the stairs, aren't they?
That's the one. And we've got someone in their cage, sitting in the green room, waiting to be uncaged. There he is. Budgie, how are you?
Good evening. Thank you for for inviting me on, Rob. I'm very well, mate. Yeah.
Good to hear.
Doing all right.
So, Russ, I dare say you'll be starring the questions that come in from the panel. So I'll tell you what, let's get out of the blocks. We've got I'm just having a little look here. So we've got a question in from Lee Anderson, I see there, Russ. So we'll start with that one. So Lee Anderson's question to the panel. Do the panel think that the Premier League has got too big for their boots? Let's see. Who should we start with? I'll tell you what, we'll start with Budgie. Go. You've got 2 minutes, Budge. What do you think on that one?
I only need about 30 seconds, mate.
Oh, no. you can elongate it, surely.
Yeah, probably. Yeah, I think that, well, all of the governing bodies to do with football are all kind of just exceeding their mandate, in my opinion. You know, like these new rules keep coming in and disappearing, and you know they can't get VAR to work in the Premier League, and yet it works very well in other competitions. You know, I think the amount of money that it generates is kind of. I think it sort of breeds contempt within the body, and I think the contempt is shown towards us, the fans, the people that pay to go and watch on a regular basis, and I think it's wrong, and teams are being squeezed, clubs are being squeezed, and like we all know at West Ham, all the concessions are gone, and there's talks about them being reintroduced, and I don't even know what the scenario is with that anymore now. But I think it's all about money for them, and I think how is it they can punish the likes of Nottingham Forest for their indiscretions, and yet we're still waiting to hear what's happening with Manchester City. And they've got a multitude of offences against them. So, it shows a little bit of favouritism, in my opinion. Doesn't matter how many offences that they're accused of. It should have been dealt with swiftly instead of, letting it go on for nearly 2 years. So, yeah.
Thank you, Budgie. Yeah. And same question to you, Sloth. What's your thoughts? The Premier League, have they got a little bit too big for their boots, in your opinion?
Well, I think Budgie was spot on when he said about it's the fact that it's a wider problem in football, in my opinion. It's not only that the Premier League have got an issue with their own arrogance. It's the fact that I think there's so much money in football, it's become like an arms race. And you see it in La Liga. And La Liga, if you don't know about how their money division works, it's the higher up you finish, the basically biggest share of the pot you get. And the Premier League have sort of set themselves aside and they've gone too far with it. We can see this in things like the handball law, where in Europe, if the ball hits your arm, it's automatically a foul. Whereas here, you've got all this nonsense about the sleeve and where does it come up to. And I think they just take themselves far too seriously. And you see it in the officials, the way that they won't have any questioning. They won't be transparent about how the officials talk to one another. And they've only just started releasing the VAR clips of like how they interact with one another. And I think it's gotten to the point where football believes itself to be above any sort of judgment beyond themselves, particularly the Premier League, like Budge mentioned with the City charges. And they try and run it like it's a court. You know, it's not done on, can we fairly press things and, you know, can we charge City when they've committed these acts? It's, oh, there's 115 charges. We're not going to deal with them all now or as they happen or as we investigate them. It's, we're going to go through all this process, all this rigmarole and charge them over the period of time, as opposed to, you know, fairly coming down on people as it happens. And that's why you lead to all this kind of mismatch of Everton being dot points, Notts Forest being hauled through hot coals about how they run things, and Newcastle trying to chase the pack and spending to do so, basically being put under heavy sanctions that it feels like no one else is under.
Thanks for that, Sloth. Appreciate your input there. Alex, what's your take on the Premier League?
Well, I mean, I'll mirror what both Budgie and Sloth said. It is a problem that is throughout the world. I mean, FIFA, UEFA, all very much the same. The Premier League, the way that they try and protect their referees, and you're not allowed to criticise, you're not allowed to say anything bad about them in the press, and they will come down very hard on you. But there's just so much division between the Premier League and a lot of the Premier League clubs, and it does mean that the fans start to feel a disconnect and see corruption. And that's what they automatically feel. Now, is there corruption or not? That is another discussion. But that's, the more and more you see it, that's the more and more it feels that way. And it feels like the fans are just not listened to now. They are all completely ignored every single season, every single day. There's something else that seems to come out that you say, well, you're not putting the fans first. Like the structure of the games, the scheduling of the games. When you're scheduling, I'm just using this as an example, when you're scheduling a West Ham United game away to Newcastle on a Monday night, that's not in the fans' interests. And it's just little things like that which just seem like such common sense to just think of the people that are actually putting the money in their pockets, because it is the fans. Because the fans, I know there is other things like commercially wise and stuff like that, but without the fans, there wouldn't be football. There wouldn't be this commercial success. So it just feels that the fans are just being left behind a lot of the time, and it's just so frustrating to watch, to see it happening over and over again now. But yeah, completely agree with both what Budgie and Sloth said, really.
So, last word on this particular topic. Russ, what's your thoughts?
I mean, to be honest, I think it's. I think the trouble is that it's the way also football's invest. Our money goes into the game. I mean, you look. No Premier League club, man, when it got into massive trouble when it came to COVID, they managed to run Premier League football without fans in the stadium, and the way it's roughly 30-30-30 in terms of match day revenue, advertising revenue, and sponsorship revenue. So, you know, where I think in Germany it's very much weighted towards the sort of the match day revenue in terms of how that works. So, look, at the end of the day, you know, and as Alex said, you know, club, you know, it was announced that, you know, Newcastle was going to be 8 o'clock on a Monday.
Yeah.
Newcastle away, 8 o'clock on a Monday. From literally one side, one end of the country to the other on a Monday. It's ridiculous. It's getting to ridiculous. It's getting to the point where I think it's going to be, I think almost like that. That's the blueprint. Obviously almost without fans, and everyone watches on TV and has a subscription and pays more money via the subscription. It's a sad indictment because, Al says, half of the joy of football is the fan interaction and the interaction between the players and the crowd. So much so that obviously during the COVID time, we had to play music when they scored goals. Otherwise, there was nothing to celebrate. It's like they scored a goal. Well, hey, but we ended up playing music. First time ever we haven't played it obviously since because you've got the fans doing it. But it just seems that it's becoming a bit sterile. Football is now. We've been fortunate enough to have loads of ex-players on the channel and stuff like that. And the stories they tell compared to, I can't expect, 20 years time, me sitting down talking to Felipe Anderson and asking my Hammers 11. Do you know what I mean? It's like, it's the personality in football's gone in my eyes, particularly when you talk to all the ex-players and stuff. It's sad, really. It is sad, but hey, what can you do? What can you do? We all support the Claret and Blue in it. So we carry on.
Well, that's kind of going to be where I'm going to take this. So what can be done, Russ? What is the antidote? Or do you think that it's too far gone? It will never sort of come back to the fans?
I don't think it's too far gone. I think, we've got, obviously, part of this current new government is bringing in, obviously, an independent person, independent sort of body to look at all sort of the whole thing of football in terms of top bottom, and obviously because of that there could be issues with us maybe next season with PSR in terms of if this shadow trial of the new PSR model is successful. I think it's like there's these pockets where we think shit football's gone one way or shit football's gone the other way, but then you see things like the iron supporting food banks, for example, and you see God rest his soul, when Peach passed, then you've got that community spirit that is still there and it's bubbling underneath, but it doesn't need to be so prevalent because we know it's still there. I think you're going to get more and more football in the game, particularly with like the American owners coming in, and more and more of them coming into the game. So it's about maintaining that community spirit, and I think we've still got it. We show it when we want to show it, but it's still there. The flip side is if we play, if the team plays well, then the fans are up, everyone's excited, and then it's all about the fans because they're the 12th man, and they bring the noise and stuff like that. It's I think it'd be interesting to see what happens when if this new in sort of independent body comes in, just to see what happens, whether it is as I think it's the German model. I think Sloth will know it more than me, but the German model in terms of bringing in the likes of fan-led ownership or percentage of the fan base being owners. That's sort of the way it goes. You see I think it was Orange County selling shares to become an owner and being sort of a totally fan-owned club in the league below the MLS as well. So there's examples, but the Premier League's a juggernaut, makes loads of money in it. So if it makes money, people want to get involved in it.
Yeah, you mentioned Sloth would probably know more about the German model.
Probably.
So let's sort of like, if I may just turn the focus onto you then, Sloth. What's your thoughts on what Russ has just said? Is there a way that maybe the German way of doing things could ever come into the Premier League, or it's just not feasible?
I think at the moment, unfortunately, so for anyone who doesn't, the Bundesliga is generally owned by fans, or the majority of the ownership is from fans. Red Bull are the most controversial club in Germany because they are privately owned. They were kind of birthed from nothing, and they had to climb their way up the divisions to get involved in the Bundesliga. So I think it's called the 51 or 51 to 49 split, and generally that 51% is fans, so they have the final say over anything that happens. I don't think we'll ever get that degree in this country. I think if it's going to happen, it's going to be a much smaller share. I do think it would be something that would be really good for the game to get the fans more involved that way. But the problem is when you have these billionaire investors, it's just, realistically, and I don't like sounding like I'm some sort of like Lord left wing or anything, but when you have a billionaire and they hear the word no, it's kind of, it's not really going to fly with them. So I think it makes it really hard to put in any of these sort of judgments. And I think we've gone a little bit too far. You look at when Serie A tried to get more money in the game in the 90s, and it kind of ended up cannibalizing itself and financially hitting it. And La Liga is in a place where at the moment it's having to bail out the likes of Barcelona. And people can go, well, they've got all these sanctions in place that the government can't support clubs. But you look at how Real Madrid financed their new training facility that they've got, how they partly finance their stadiums and things. And it's all government led, that they've got this injection of cash to do so. So I think when we look at an independent regulator coming in, it's very tricky, because whenever there's these huge amounts of money involved, there's always going to be someone who goes, actually, I'm not going to listen to you. Why should I listen to you? This is my money. And it makes it very hard. So unless you have a definitive way of changing the ownership structure at these clubs and around the Premier League, I think it will be very hard to do. It's something that I think, is the ideal way that football's run. And I'm a kind of a big believer that clubs should be self-sustaining and they should never be in the position where they don't exist. That's the only time when I think that a government should really step in and get involved in a sporting sense, is that if, when Bury went bust and they ceased to exist, why did the government not help? It's that to me is the bigger outrage of could you really see the Premier League letting a club like Chelsea or Man City cease to exist, or kicking them out down the divisions like Serie A did to Juventus because of these 115 charges? Can we really see that happening? Is the Premier League going to, roast its golden goose to a certain extent? And that's where I have issues with such a big change. Maybe I'm cynical, but I can't really see it.
Just want to explore something also that Russ said. If I can just turn the focus on to you, Alex. Russ mentioned about American ownership in the Premier League, and obviously there's quite a large quantity of American owners that have got Premier League clubs under their stewardship. Does it concern you that because there's often been this hypothesis that if you get an amount of American owners, I think the number's 14 is the magic number, that the concern is that you're going to get a situation where the American owners are going to basically have the clout to be able to scrap promotion and relegation from the Premier League. Is that something that alarms you?
Well, I mean, if it ever did get to that, then yeah, it definitely would, because I mean, the American style of football, the way that they run their leagues over there is their own way, and if that's the way they want to run it, then that's fine. But the way that we run our leagues over here, promotion, relegation, things like that, the chance for teams like Luton to come up for all the divisions to come into the Premier League, that is a core part of football. That is such a massive part that even if you're supporting your local team that may have been around in like League One or League Two for quite a while, they suddenly can have this burst and then jump up the leagues, and then suddenly they're playing Premier League football. It doesn't happen a lot, but the fact that it can happen and it brings the enjoyment to the local community and the fans is such a special thing in football. So yeah, it definitely worries me that would be a possibility. But I think we saw when those big six teams wanted to create that Super League, the fans stood up and they all united, and it very, very quickly turned around. And so I would still hope that the fans do still have some kind of pull, although maybe not as much pull if there is 14 American owners who do want to change the Premier League, who do want to do things like taking games to America, which I am so unbelievably against as well. but because of the amount of money in the game, it is definitely something that is a possibility. And yeah, it does concern me, but I try not to worry about things that are not happening right now. But yeah, it is a concern, and you hope that the Premier League sees sense. And I genuinely would just love it a little bit more if clubs and the Premier League as in general just asked the opinion of fans of how they feel about things, and actually took those things into consideration, and maybe that we have a say at least in how things are run. We have an opinion, because at the moment it just feels like fans in general are not listened to whatsoever.
How about yourself, Budgie? American ownership in the Premier League is if promotion and relegation was scrapped, how does that sit with you?
It sits quite heavy with me. I really wouldn't like that. But just briefly, I want to actually go back to the fan ownership model
Please
in
do.
Germany. That will never happen because, as we spoke about before, the Premier League is too big for their boots, and they won't allow that to happen. I'm sure of it. But like playing, like Alex said, playing games in America is so alien and it's unnecessary. The Premier League is a British league. It's a I won't say an English league because many people around the British Isles support a Premier League team. And to take games away to places like the States or Dubai or anywhere like that, I think it kind of devalues our league in some way. Because, well, morally, it devalues our league, I believe, and I just wouldn't want to see, any club ownership having a stronghold over the Premier League either, and like Alex said, the magic number of 14, and they would be quite a force to be reckoned with. But, again, I think the Premier League would resist it.
Thank you, Budgie. We've got a question that was submitted by West Ham faithful, gentlemen. So, Russ, if you could do the honours and get that question up on the screen for everybody. So, the question from West Ham faithful is: if you could pick one player from a previous generation of West Ham to improve this current squad, who would you pick and why? Let's start with Alex.
To improve this, but from any generation, that's such a. I mean, the obvious ones. I go back to like recently and players like Pyatt and stuff like that. But I don't feel like that's a player that we need right now. And it's just trying to think. It's definitely. I feel like it is a dynamic striker that we need. I would absolutely. I feel like a player like Dean Ashton, a fit Dean Ashton would fit absolutely brilliantly, or a Tony Cottee as well. I feel like he would work really well. Maybe not so much in a front three and playing up on his own, but I'd probably say someone like Dean Ashton. Very strong, mobile, pacey. That's got a great finish on him. He is a player that I think could really slot into the West Ham United side at the moment. And he would have been great if it wasn't for all his injuries, unfortunately. Yeah, I'll probably go there.
Yeah, well, I when you said Dean Ashton, Tony Cottee, Russ knows that because we had a couple of messages going back and forth yesterday, and they were the two players that I mentioned as my striker options. I also did put a couple of options on the left wing, and one of them was Dimitri Payet, and the other one was a certain Alan Devonshire. It was one of those. I was torn. But yeah, that was just my take on that question. But when you said Ashton and Cottee, I was like, yeah, we're thinking along the same lines here, Alex. But if I just sort of like throw that question over to you, Sloth, again, same question, previous generation from your time as a West Ham fan, who do you think would slot in and what would be your reasons behind that decision?
It's funny because this is exactly the conversation that Mike and I had on the Hammers Chat podcast. We were trying to pick a player, and spoiler alert, we came up with four. It was Dean Ashton, Carlos Tevez, Demba Ba, and Dimitri Payet. And so, it's not a bad selection of attackers to come from. I think in my time, the sort of 30 years that I've been a West Ham fan, I say 30, like I was in nappies of West Ham, I wasn't. But I think Demba Ba for me was someone who I wish we'd had more time with. And if we'd stayed up that year, I think he would have absolutely smashed it for us. We said in the video, he got 7 goals in 12 appearances in the Premier League for us. And that is some record. I think in this side, he would be scoring for fun, as he did at Newcastle. But I'm a simple man. Anyone who's watched Babbling knows I'm a simple guy. And I think I would probably have to go with Carlos Tevez, just because I think he was everything that West Ham fans love. He was a hard worker, incredibly skillful, but he would give it back to the fans as well. And he would get the place rocking. And could you imagine having him up top with Kudus, Bowen, Somerville on the other side, Paqueta around him? The place would be absolutely rocking. So for me, I think, we didn't see much of him, but the idea of getting a full season out of him with that talent around him, for me, I think Carlos Tevez.
Wow, good, nice choice. Like it. How about yourself, Russ? Because I know you, when we had the messages going back and forth, you said your one might be a little bit out of left field, but you didn't tell me who.
Not really. It was a really interesting question actually, and because if you look at the sides. If you look at the side sort of in its sort of composite parts, goalkeeper we're okay, left back we're all right, right back I think potentially we've got one of the best left backs we've ever had in the Premier League's history in Aaron Wan-Bissaka. Centre halves, I think we've got a good pair in there. Midfield, we've got a good pair in. Left we've got Somerville. Right, we're all right. Bowen, we've got Kudus, got Payet. For me, it was the striker is who we would have, and Demba Ba's a great shout. But my one will be Marko Arnautovic.
Oh,
great choice.
And the reason is and it's probably similar to the sort of Demba Ba, really, to be honest, because he was quick. He could get past play. In terms of that sort of position, I was thinking, what about Jermaine Defoe or Cotton? I think they'd get eaten up in the way we set up now. It has to be quite a strong target man, and much like Demba Ba, Marco he had a bit of skill about him. He could link up play. He was a bit of a nasty bastard, but he was lethal. And he gave him half a chance and he would score. And that's for me, even more so than the Carlos Tevez, because I think he had the ability to hold it up as well, and he could mix it with a centre half as well, which is what Antonio can do. He can mix it with centre half. He can play in behind. He can run the channels, but he hasn't got that sort of lethal. I remember some of the goals he scored under Moyes. Some of those, particularly that sort of how many times you get something out of nothing. And I like a bastards player, and you haven't really got a bastard player anymore now. That's why I like Kevin Nolan and people like that, and Craig Bellamy. And I think he was, but you'd have to get him on a good day. But I'd have Marco. That's who I'd have.
Not a bad choice, I've got to say there, Russ. Finally, Budgie, any player from your a previous era of West Ham? You've seen a few of them, if I may say so.
You quite often do. I think if I was going to go back to sort of a nostalgic choice, it would have to be Bobby Moore. It would have to be, regardless of how solid we are at the back. He would have to be my number one choice. But as you said, the way, as you've all said, that the way we are at the moment, we're pretty solid in defence. We've got a really good selection of midfielders and attackers. The one thing we do lack is a striker. So for me, I think I'd like to have a 25-year-old Teddy Sheringham.
Ooh, tell me more.
Right. Do I have to? Do I need to? I mean,
go on.
Wow, come on, Teddy Sheringham. Throughout his career, he was a goal scorer.
Yeah.
he wasn't known for having the hardest of shots, but most accurate. He was probably up there somewhere. He was good in the air for a short guy. It was almost like he had an invisible stepladder at times. He got higher than defenders. He could take players on. He could assist. He could, play the wings if he had to. I think he was just a small version of the very best Mikel Antonio. Do you know what I mean? But with a lot more of a goal threat, in my opinion, from anywhere, really.
Fair enough, Budgie. Thanks for that. I just wanted to get a little bit more detail. Do forgive me. I'm very mischievous like that. Got a question from Colin Chilvers in the chat. Evening, Colin. Hope you're well. Colin's question is: do the panel ever see teams going back to playing to strikers up front in a pairing? I'm guessing, or is that a thing of the past? So let's start with you, Sloth. Two up top. Is that ever a vogue that we're going to get back to, or is that from a bygone era, never to return?
I think it's really interesting because at the moment you've got a lot of conversation, particularly led by Big Sam, where he's talking about how Pep Guardiola's kind of tricked people into playing a passing out from the back system, and instead of this long game and going direct and having a more attacking focus on how you play, as opposed to this tick-tacker element that's a lot of teams are sort of trying to play. And while I kind of think there is a degree of that, I think there is always a place for good strikers in the game. And I don't necessarily think that it's something that will be phased out, because two strikers can be an incredibly fruitful thing for a side. It's just a question of balancing it out. And I think, it's the trickiest part of the pitch to recruit, and that can often be the reason that we don't play with two strikers, or you don't see many sides play with two strikers in the Premier League, because I think if you imagine having two players up top who could potentially score 15 goals, and then you have a bench and options just in case they get injured, so you can continue to play a system, or you can mix it up and try something different. I think it would be something I'd love to see. I'd love to see more teams going back to two up top, and I do think there is a place for it. A big man, a small man is something that I think could work really well for us if we went out and got, say, like a 6'3" forward, or played Bowen off Fulkrug. I think that could really work, because we know that Bowen's going to do the work rate, but it's just about the recruitment and making sure that if you're a side like, say, Ipswich at the moment, and they've got Delap, who's going to run off him? Who's going to be that second man? And who's going to make sure they're chasing back to defend and offer that sort of cover that playing two up top would have? I think it's a great shout. I'd definitely love to see it, but it's about coaching it. And I think a lot of the coaches coming through at the moment are either focusing on playing a pressing style, like, they're sort of Jurgen Klopp, Gegenpress, or they're focused on playing this sort of tick-attacker style. And it will be really interesting to see if someone does try and break that mold.
Thank you for that, Sloth. Alex, two up top, are we ever going to get back to that?
I've been thinking about it. I think at the moment, two up top is more used as a bit of a Hail Mary at the moment. Like, at the end of the game, you're trying to get a goal, you just stick two strikers up top and then you just go for it. And I feel like that's pretty much how it's used these days. But I mean, I remember growing up with a 4-4-2. Whenever I think of the football team, it's always 4-4-2 in my head, and then I have to rejig it to the system it is now. But I do wonder if it's going to be one of those things that kind of goes a little bit out of fashion, and then maybe in 20 or 30 years' time, it kind of gets reintroduced as a new idea, and then someone says, "Oh, I remember someone doing that about 30 years ago, playing 4-4-2, two strikers. That's a really good idea." But the way that football's going at the moment, I feel like they're trying to phase strikers out completely, and instead of having a dedicated goal scorer, having 3 up top who can share the goals between them, and that's the way it looks to me that football is going at the moment. But there's definitely still a place for it. But it's very hard to see a team playing a 4-4-2 against a team that's not playing a 4-4-2. The system that other teams play, you couldn't imagine us setting up in a 4-4-2 against someone like a City or someone like that. But if two teams were kind of setting up that same way, then it might be something that comes back one day. But I don't see it coming back apart from, as I said, being used as like a Hail Mary at the end of the game just to try and score a goal. But maybe one day it'll be reintroduced and someone has this fantastic idea who's never heard of 4-4-2 and thinks it's a great thing to try.
Thank you, Alex. Budgie, I'm sure you can think of many partnerships going back to Cotty and McAvenny, Hurston, Hop Robson, etc., etc. Is that ever something you can envisage we get back to?
Not necessarily as a 4-4-2, but I've actually noticed that sometimes Brentford set up like a 3-5-2. Quite often they've got one striker and Weester, or whatever his name is, slots in behind him, just behind him. So it's almost like they play with 2 up top occasionally. But I agree. I still think there's a place for it. The big man and the small man partnerships always used to work quite nicely. And, and when you've got 2 talented players, like, as you said, McAvenny and Cotty, that can work very well as well, but I kind of see more of a 3-5-2 approach to it if it was to be used, I think, but 4-4-2 was a fantastic system. I always used to play it when I was playing.
Thank you, Budgie. Russ, how about yourself? 2 up top, will it ever come back in like flared trousers?
I don't think it will. Things do tend to come around cyclically, and it's like I remember, I can't remember who it was. It was someone like Machiavelli or someone we interviewed, and he was talking about all this bollocks about false nines and and John Lard had been playing that, and we've been playing that in the 80s, and things do tend to come around just like music and Beetlejuice and stuff like that. I just don't think with 2 strikers. I think I agree with Alex. It seems almost like Arsenal don't have us. They put Carl Havertz usually there, and yes, they use Jesus sometimes, but I think it's more the fans enjoy that, having that sort of focal point. Obviously, the exception to the rule is Haaland, isn't it? But he's the exception that breaks the rule. I think we'll always. I think Mandy put in the chat. I was going to say the same thing. It's hard enough for us to find 1 decent striker, let alone 2. So obviously back in the day, Cotty and Macca. We had for a period of time Ashton and Bellamy, which would have been an amazing if that was given more time without Ashton's injury. I just don't think. I think teams, unless you're probably one of the top 3 or 4 teams in the Premier League, you set up not to lose first. And I think most people do. So it's having that extra midfielder in. And then, as Alex says, Hail Mary, throwing a second striker. We sort of play a little bit like 2 up front at times anyway. Sometimes Bowen pushes up or Kudus pushes up. We have Paqueta push up and join the striker, but not in a 4-4-2. We put inverted wingers on and stuff like that. Football can be a very easy game when you play, wingers on the right position, crossing the balls in. For the big man, for Andy Carroll or someone to nod it in. Football can be an easy game, but I just don't think we'll ever get back to that. Never. And you don't see it in the lower leagues either. You don't see it in the academy either. We play a 4-3-3 in the academy, in the 18s and 21s. So again, if you're not learning at that stage, that's the stage you need to learn it. So when we get up to the Premier League and the first team, it's second nature. No, don't think we will, mate.
Fair. Okay, we got a question. This was submitted by Dad's Our Job podcast, who I believe, when I looked in the chat a little earlier, were lurking around with intent. And you referenced about lower league clubs in your answer there, Russ. So it kind of dovetails in with this. So the question is, as ticket prices keep going up, are you now considering going to lower leagues to get your children into football? What would be your local national league and below side? So let's start with Alex. Do you ever envisage that might have to be something you might have to do yourself, or have you even done it already?
I have to get my kids interested in football first, but to be able, they love hearing about it, but they're not really a fan of watching it. But I would love to take them to a game one time. But yeah, I mean, lower league football is definitely the better option to try and get them into football in the first place. One is probably a little bit more exciting to watch. You probably get a little bit more of a little bit more of an atmosphere at some of them. So it would be definitely a good option to try and get the kids into a game. But yeah, I've got to get my kids interested in football first, and they're two girls, so yeah, not overly interested in football at the moment, but hopefully one day they do. And yeah, for me, it'll be Dagenham and Redbridge would be I guess the highest one, but there's also Hornchurch as well, or I can't remember. But yeah, so yeah, I mean, I would though, if they ever were interested. Yeah, take them to a low league side. That's probably a better option. Definitely cheaper.
Yeah, couldn't be any more expensive. How about yourself, Russ?
So I actually, it's not even national. It's about getting them into the women's game. That's great. I took Flo to a few games when they were at Rush Green. We've been over to the Daggers, and it's great. I mean, when I was a kid, Orient used to be a tenner for a season ticket for under 16. So I used to jump on the train. I was at Loughton at the time, so Central on a few stops. They always used to play at home and West Ham were away. Used to go and watch the O's quite a bit. Seen some great games there. But I think football in general is becoming expensive. Not just the Premier League. I think even you see all these YouTubers who do their away days or they go on the road and things like that with Smith and Ellis, and it ain't cheap. Even for a ticket to see a League Two or a National South Side or something, you're paying a lot. You're still paying like 15, 20 quid, and it's not cheap in comparison to the Premier League, but for what you're getting, really. But I think the women's football is great. It's brilliant, and it's in. You still feel like supporting West Ham as well, and the academy. Get down to Rush Green. 7 p.m. on a Friday. It's great fun. It costs a couple of quid. I think it's free for your season ticket anyway. And I'd highly recommend going down that because you see a great standard of football. You see some random, first team players might turn up or, just because they can. And that's what I would do. But I'm the same as Alex. I live in the same area as Alex. So it would be Hornchurch, who I believe Dad's one of the gentlemen at Dad's our podcast company's sponsors. So that's probably why they asked the question. But or Dagenham Redbridge or even a bit further out, Averley maybe. But yeah, no, I would go for the academy. We can you go and watch them play. And so the money's, it's a couple of quid and it's a great night. Friday night, 7 o'clock. I think we play Chelsea week off next, 7 p.m. I'll be there on the Blues and Twos. Anyway, that's enough of a plug.
I was going to say it's a shameless plug. Well done. No, I think it's a drum that needs to be beat. If I'm being completely honest. How about yourself, Budgie? Because I know you've got. Correct me if I'm wrong. You've got Crawley near you. Have you ever been tempted to go and watch your local?
Yeah. Crawley Town ground is 300 yards up the road from me. So when they're playing, if I'm at home, I always hear the crowd and that. But yeah, I've been down there a number of times. I've taken my daughter there. I've taken my son there. My brother and I go regularly. My pal Dave, I've been with him, and they just gained promotion to League One, which is a good step for them. But like Russ said, I liked Russ's answer actually. Get into the academy. or the women's team. You know, I mean, the standard of football with the women's team is getting better and better every time, every day. And you know, and like Russ said, you're still supporting West Ham. So yeah, I like that.
How about yourself, Sloth? Lower league football, is it something you would advocate yourself?
I think it's a fantastic alternative if you can't get to a Premier League game, especially if you just, if you can't get a hold of tickets. I'm very lucky where I am. I'm kind of Farnborough way, and I've got lots of options around me. There's Aldershot and there's Reading's quite easy to get to. I can hop on the train and go to Pompey if I want to, and my gran is from Pompey, so I'm going to try and get to a game this season as well, because I'd love to see them back in the Premier League at some point. But got to echo the sentiment of the other two as well, Russ and Budgie, where they were talking about the women's game as well, because I think that's a really interesting thing to try and get behind. And I think as more money goes into it as well, the standard's going to get better. But it's the same with the youth team, and if you can support them, it's going to be more money for the club. It's going to be more money for the academies, and I think as well you might be in with a chance of seeing Mark Noble. So get yourself down there, because it's generally quite a good standard, and you might not have the same atmosphere, but it's going to be something that's a bit more family friendly as well. If you're looking to take kids there, I'm lucky that, well, I say lucky, I don't have any kids running about. I don't think anyway, but it's something that if I did, I'd definitely look to get them to the youth games and the women's game, because it's by far the cheaper alternative, even in comparison to, say, League One. My girlfriend, her parents live near Wolverhampton, and so we were looking at going to a Wrexham game just to kind of see what the fuss was about, and even that was 30-40 quid. And I thought, for after a couple of pints or a pie or something like that, you're looking at 100 quid just for a match.
You're muted, Gatesy. You're doing so well.
Hang on, there we go. I'm back. Okay, let's have a look. We've got a question from Howard in the chat. Howard Ailes, good evening to you. He's asking the question: most goals, most assists in the season. So basically, who do you think's going to get the most goals? Who do you think's going to get the most assists in a claret and blue shirt? Let's start with you, Budgie. What's your thoughts? Who do you think's going to get those accolades?
So I don't get time to think about it. Great, thanks for that. Well, I think maybe as far as the assists are concerned, it's going to be a tie between Paqueta and Kudus, I think, and most goals will be a tie between Kudus and Bowen, in my opinion.
He's going to be a busy boy, Mohamed Kudus, then, in your book.
Yeah, mate. Yeah.
Fair enough. How about yourself, Russ?
Kudus. Simple as. Kudus, and then unfortunately, I reckon he'll be gone next summer.
Yeah, probably.
He's played his shop window. Yeah.
If Kudus is moved more into the middle, then I would definitely say that he'd probably get the most goals. But if he's not, I'd say he'd probably get the most assists, but it'll probably be Bowen who would get the most goals. But yeah, it depends where Kudus ends up playing for the majority of the season. If he's playing on the left, I don't think he will get most goals. But if you move him into that middle, definitely have a great chance of scoring most goals this season. But if not, it'd be Bowen.
And if we just throw that question over to you there, Sloth.
I think most assists will probably be Kudus, and I think goals probably Bowen. I think it will be close between him and Kudus, but I just think Bowen, he's just in when he gets in good form, it's hard to stop him. So I think he'll probably be the top goal scorer this season.
Can't believe none of you have suggested Michail Antonio the top goal scorer. What can you do? We got a question from Neil Fitzpatrick in the chat. He asks the question: given more fans are interested in results rather than watching good football, Do you agree this shows money has spoiled our game and is now more important than the football? So let's start with you, Sloth. What's your thoughts on Neil's question?
Well, I think it's a tough one, because I think it's very easy to say fans are more concerned about results, but I think fans are more concerned about the future of their club. And if that means relegation, then I would personally take poor football above us going down into the Championship just for a season. And if it's something that we can build upon, I don't like the idea of us just continually being playing poor football. But I grew up in a time when we weren't particularly successful. You know, in the sort of late 90s and the early 2000s, we weren't very good. We did get relegated a few times, and I think that now we're in the best place we've ever been. You know, in my lifetime anyway. So I think that it's a very fine balance, and if you can use it as a springboard, if you can take a season of playing poorly to kind of cement yourself as a Premier League team and then play good football, you can go to that. It's just about you know, balancing it, because you look at someone like Big Sam. You know, Bolton were in the Premier League and people used to just accuse him of hoofball. But I bet you those Bolton fans would be saying we'd take it every single day now. Like if you could offer me that again, I'd go straight back. And they weren't deemed as having played good football, despite the fact they had Beja Okocha, Kevin Davis, and Kevin Nolan. I think it's kind of all down to the individual, but it's a tricky one. Just kind of on the money side of things, you mentioned relegation earlier, and it's something that I don't think will ever disappear, because you'll have every single club in the lower division go, what do you think you're doing? This has completely changed the game for us, and there's no way you can possibly remove it just from a legal business standpoint of view, in my opinion. But it's something that I think football's changing. It's ever changing. It's always moving. And we used to have a lot more mavericks and players who like Matt Letitia weren't particularly fitness focused. I think I'm being kind in saying that. They could score, but they just wouldn't make it in today's game because of the way the game is going. And I think you can look to play better football, but you've got to balance it up. And are you going to put the means of playing good football over the potential league safety of your side and the financial benefits of that? And or do you not have a long-term plan, or do you want to have a long-term plan that is built towards playing good football? And that is the tricky thing. I think it's a fine balance. And as I mentioned, I would take playing poor football for a season if it meant another Conference League, if it meant something like that. But don't get me wrong, it's not fun when you're watching bad football. It's not fun when you get relegated either, and I think everyone on here can agree on that.
Absolutely, thank you for that, Sloth. Alex, you're over to you. Results?
Yeah.
The be all and the end all?
I mean, no, I don't think it is the be all and the end all. But I do think, I agree with Soft that there definitely does have to be a fine balance between it. I mean, I'm just going to take Tottenham for example. At the beginning of last season, they were loving the football that was being played, and they were loving the attacking style that was being played. But they were a little bit worried about them being defensively and playing that high line. And now this season, a lot of the complaints that the Tottenham fans have is, well, we're not picking up these results. We're playing good football, we're not picking up these results. So playing good football and not picking up results would only work for so long. If you were playing good football, but you were languishing down the bottom of the league, very frustrated very quickly. But at the same time, if you're playing good football, if you're not playing good football, but you are picking up results, it also does get very frustrating. And I know that we all know that from experience under Dave Moyes. The football was just not good last season. It wasn't. The majority of my review videos started off with, God, did we make hard work of that? Because that's how they really felt. We felt exhausting watching these games because they were just so frustrating. So there definitely has to be a fine balance. But at the end of the day, football is a game. It's a sport. It's a game that you want to win, and it's a results game. And sometimes you have to play dirty football to get a result. You just don't want to you don't want to see it every single week. So yeah, there's got to be a fine balance.
Same question to you, Budgie, from Neil. Results, performances, money, all those things. What's your thoughts?
Well, I think that I'll address the money side of it first. Do I agree that money has spoilt the game? I think it's a lot more than money that has spoilt the game, to be fair. I think, as we mentioned earlier on, the intervention of, like the FA with their rules and this and that, I think that's kind of ruined the game a bit. I think it was Alex that mentioned the handball, that they can't decide where it is and where it isn't. So many things have ruined the game for me. It's not as pure as it used to be. But, as Alex just mentioned, it is a, results-based sport. So, yes, of course, results are important, but, you don't want to be watching 10 men on the bloody goal line, for 90 minutes, basically. So, I think, a bit of decent football is the least we deserve.
Thank you, Budgie. I've just noticed Fortune's hiding down under TV's comment. How many more people are going to say that I've been in court today? Last word to you, Russ, on that question from Neil.
I think it's a balancing act, as Alex said, and I think we've all suffered relegation. It's not fun. It ain't fun. It's fun when you start winning games in the Championship, and it's fun because you go to different clubs. But it isn't fun, not necessarily on the terraces in the stadium, but when your mates are like Tottenham fans or whatever, and you're not on match of the day, and you've got to find a different stream to watch the Championship games and things like that. I think there needs to be a balancing act. I think you're right. We've had arguably one of the most successful periods in our club's recent history over the last 3 or 4 years. And I think Damien said in the chat, points win prizes. And unfortunately, the money in the game now means that you won't see teams experiment. You won't see a 2 up top experimentation. You won't see him throw in a 17-year-old academy boy, because the pressure on getting points, because every point, every place is £2 million, £2.5 million. And, I think we'll feel it next year because we haven't been in Europe this year. And I think then we'll say, because then we won't have money to go and buy good players. And, and it's a real sort of, chicken egg syndrome. We'd love to play. I think everyone would love to play. I mean, look at Brighton. I mean, Brentford always seem to be playing. They always seem to be a side that are well run, play good football. They were languishing near the bottom of the Premier League last year. And Spurs. As you said, you're right. What you said. We had Flavon from the Fighting Cock last year, and he was saying, we were talking about the game, and afterwards, I was asking about Ange Boy. He goes, I love it, but I'd wish they play a bit more once in a while. I didn't get him to say it on camera, but that's what he said. And it is that balancing act between when to put it, to give it a rugby analogy, when to put up your jumper. And I think now with the squad we've got, we can do both. So we can play nice football, and then we can bring on Rodriguez, play a 2 pivot, CDM role, stick it up the jumper if we need to. And hopefully we'll see a bit of both, points and performance.
Well, time has beaten us once again, gentlemen. Thanks very much indeed for joining us. Before we all go our separate ways, I'd just like to give, just out of courtesy to a few of the guys on the panel, Sloth, please feel free to give your content a bit of a push.
Well, if you can stand this curly-haired idiot more, I'm on Babbling Irons. We do YouTube.
Oh. We'll give him a plug. Babbling Irons.
But yeah, we try and we've really tried to put a data focus, but much of the day sort of blend on our match reviews now and give more analysis while not going over the top and making it all seem like it's false nines and XG and all that. So we're trying something a bit different with our match analysis. If you want to come and support us, please do give us a view, give us comments as well, because we're fairly new, I'd say, maybe a year or so, but the only way we're going to get better is if people get involved and tell us what we're doing wrong. And I know I do a lot of things wrong. So yeah, thank you so much for having me on, and thank you to all of you.
Thank you very much, Sloth. How about yourself, Budgie? You want to give any of your content a little bit of a push?
Thank you. Yeah. Well, as most of you that know me already know, you can catch me on this very channel on a Wednesday evening at 10 o'clock with Kieran, with the Old School Hammers show that we do. I also do regular appearances on the Bowling Lounge with Jeff. And and Early Doors Football TV, I do a little bit with them as well. So, you know, I have my own channel, which is Green Street Elites. Give us a look.
Thanks, Budgie. Alex, I'm sure that most of the people watching this know precisely who you and Russ are for obvious reasons. However, over to you.
Yeah, well, obviously I'm part of West Ham Network Extra, the extra channel that we have recently started with us. You can find me Tuesdays on the West Ham Network doing TikTok Takeover, and I'm mostly over on TikTok at the moment, West Ham Fan 86, and that's where you'll get a lot more of my short views on West Ham United and, you know, match reports and things like that. But I do post a lot of that, the longer version stuff up on the West Ham Network Extra as well. And so yeah, you can find me there and on the West Ham Network Tuesdays for Alex's TikTok Takeover. That's where you can find myself.
Thank you, Alex. I'm guessing I probably don't need to give Russ a plug on his own channel, so that I'll probably just leave where it is. So I'll tell you what I'll do. For those of you that sort of don't know who the hell I am, I inhabit a channel called the West Ham Massive. So if any of you guys are not yet subscribed to the West Ham Massive, I'd greatly appreciate it if you could just put in the West Ham Massive on YouTube and give us a subscribe. We're actually going to do an aftermath show, so we're going to decamp over to the West Ham Massive. There should be, I believe, Russ has done something very clever in the background that I don't possibly understand, called a channel redirect or something. It's all very clever stuff. So if you fancy popping over and just having a quick little sort of get together and just sort of have a little bit of a debrief thing, please feel free to pop over. I'd greatly appreciate it. And on that note, I think we're going to go and have a quick freshen up, and we'll see you in a few minutes, hopefully on the West Ham Massive. And thank you very much for your button pressing duties, Russ.
I think it's probably the best button pressing I've done in my career.
Brilliant. Superb. Well, we'll see you again soon, and don't forget to drop a like on the stream, and we'll see you in about 4 weeks, I guess.
Yeah, 4 weeks' time.